welcome to this brand new session of the Silmarillion Film Project. I am your co-host Dave Kale, and I'm excited to tell you that tonight we are beginning our script discussions.
That's right.
And this, I believe I heard the 24th session of season 5. Are we in the thousands of episodes yet?
Not quite thousands for film alone, but we're now solidly into the triple digits, I would think.
Yes.
Yeah,
definitely solidly in the triple digits. But we'll get there. We will make we will hit 1,000 eventually.
Yeah, well, probably before we destroy the ring, I would imagine.
equally grave endeavors, those two things.
Absolutely.
Anyway, as you can hear and see, if you're joining us on the live stream, because we're no longer just a podcast, we're
That's
now
right.
a live stream.
Totally
we were always
sophisticated.
Yeah. But officially a live stream. But as
Absolutely.
you can see and hear, I'm joined by three other folks tonight. As always, we have the Tolkien Professor Corey Olson and increasingly regular guests, basically co-hosts at this point, Marie Prosser and Nick Palazzo. I mean, you guys are always here, so.
Well, it's only because they do all the work. Really, is the primary reason why they're here.
Not all.
Well,
there are other people doing a lot of work.
That is true.
And it only seemed appropriate to ask them to do more work.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It does. It seems the perfectly fitting reward, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. So
how are you guys doing, by the way?
Good, thank you.
We just wrapped up our script discussion for episode 8, so yeah, we're doing pretty well.
You guys are managing to stay ahead of us there, so that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah. Well, we're taking off a week, 2 weeks actually, because I'm going to be out of town. But we're hoping to stay well ahead of you guys, so we have plenty of time to write the hey.
It's Wally. Hi, Wally.
Oh man, yeah. It's not as exciting as Nessa's mostly unclad Twitch debut.
Yes.
What is
exactly?
I gotta tell before we get too deep into this, Karita, I know you're here, and I want to let you know that you have missed your chance. Because this episode would have been your perfect opportunity. I just realized this 2 days ago. Would have been your perfect opportunity to layer in all kinds of Seven Brides for Seven Brothers influences and references.
Yeah, well, I was saying, Karita, at the very least, I think we still have the opportunity to put them in brightly colored shirts and color code some of our characters, which actually could be really handy in this episode, I think. So, know, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, Karita, there's a dance scene in a barn and everything. I mean, it's
barn raising.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's pretty classic right there. Absolutely. No, so tonight's exciting. We're going to get to talk about, so not only are we talking about the plot of episode 4, as we've been discussing the plots along the way, but this time we also have a script draft to discuss, which is awesome. So I'm looking forward to talking about it. I enjoyed reading the script, and we'll get back to that. So let's start with a couple quick announcements, and then we'll dig into things here. So. 2 event-related announcement. One is for 2 days from now, Tex Moot is happening this weekend on Saturday, February 13th. Still time to register. This is a virtual moot. Of course, our regional moot program normally is about, facilitating local get-togethers in different parts of the country. Of course, we haven't been able to do that for a year now, but we do have a couple of our sort of longest-running regional moots, which are still organizing virtually this year. So we have a digital moot, which is still hosted by the Tex Moot team, even though we all just have to pretend that we're in Texas. But it's going to be a great time. We've got a lot of people coming to Tex Moot this weekend. So some great presentations going on, and I'm really looking forward to that. So that's this Saturday, February 13th. Admission is only $15, $10 for undergrads, students, I think, generally. So definitely join us if you can. And again, that's 2 days from today on February 13th. Also, Mythmoot is coming soon. Mythmoot 8 is going to be happening in June. Registration is not open yet, so this is a little bit of a tease for Mythmoot. But we have, speaking of Karita, there's the immortal picture of Karita playing the part of Frodo being galloped towards the ford in our reenactment a couple years back. But we are doing Mythmoot this year on June 27th. June 24th to 27th are our dates. And sorry, I'm on the guests page. This is the page I wanted. June 24th to 27th. Mythmoot 8, The World Ahead is our theme. You can see our guests, as I was just showing, Dr. Ebony Elizabeth Thomas, the author of The Dark Fantastic, Carl Hostetter, who is, of course, the editor of the new Tolkien book being released in June that very month, and Brenton Dickinson, one of our Signum faculty and a wonderful C.S. Lewis scholar, going to be coming and talking about C.S. Lewis and the Inklings. So this is going to be a really, really fun Mythmoot. Let me explain briefly about how we're doing Mythmoot, because of course still a lot of uncertainty about stuff. Our plan is we're going to be releasing online registration for Mythmoot, but we are not yet 100% giving up on the possibility that we might be able to get together. So we're gonna make that determination at the end of March. We have a definite time where we're gonna make that determination one way or the other. But we're gonna open the registration for online enrollment. So you can enroll at either one of the two enrollment levels that we had at last year's Digital Moot, which is the Mootcast one, which is so that you can sign in and you can either watch the sessions live or you can get the recordings afterward. The Mootcast is especially good if you don't have time to not actually be with us during all the days, that weekend, to be kind of part of the synchronous experience. But Moot Hub is the one which, if you can, so you can not only attend the sessions, but you can also be part of the community events and the hangouts and stuff. It's a really wonderful 4-day experience there with everybody around. So Moot Hub attendee or registrants will, if we are able to do anything in person, we'll have the opportunity to do an upgrade to add that later on. But we're definitely going to be, we know we're definitely going to be doing the two virtual levels in any case, one way or the other. So we're going to start registration for that pretty soon. Anyway, that just save the date there, June 24th to 27th. Registration should be open soon. So that is the second announcement. And third announcement, the Film script discussion for episode 9 is going to be on Sunday, February 21st. That is, what is that? Next weekend, right? Next Sunday. So Sunday week now at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can tune into that on twitch.tv/SignumU if you want to join in there. Of course, you should also, if you have thoughts or ideas about episode 9, you could also post on those in the discussion boards. All right, so that's the stuff that is coming up here in the film world. Now let's get into episode 4 called Unwelcome. If you want to see the draft copy of the script that we're going to be talking about, you can go to the Signum forums in the Film Project, click on the script forum, click on season 5, and you will find it, script discussion, season 5, episode 4. You'll be able to find the script there, and there's a direct link here, which is going to be a little bit harder if you're watching this on YouTube or something, but it's here and you can copy it if you can see the PDF. So that's where you can find your copy of the script. Of course, our Signum forums are where, forums.signumuniversity.org. In the Film section, Film Project section is where all the work goes on here for this project. So definitely want to point people in that direction. Now, episode 4. So let's remember where we ended up, because I'm very forgetful and it's been like weeks since we talked about it. So episode 3, actually, okay, so hang on.
Death of Beor.
The death of Beor, right? So we had episode 1, Beor and the people arriving, right? And in the end, choosing to go to Nargothrond with Finrod. We had the big meeting between Beor and the House of Beor and Finrod, and they choose to go to Nargothrond. And then, and also, meanwhile, Aredhel is planning to leave, right? She's
He leaves.
having discussions with Turgon and saying, I'm gonna go, right? Episode 2.
Oh yeah.
Is when she actually departs, right? So that's when she actually departs and has issues, right? Gets separated from folks, and she thinks they're dead, and they think she's dead, and she goes on, or at least she's lost, and they don't know where she's gone. And then we, but that, and then that is the main plot, right? That the A plot was the Aredhel plot of that one, right? And of course, she ends up in Nen Elmoth, and we ended that with a meeting between her and Eol, right? And the B plot was in Nargothrond, right? The Beor and the people settling in Nargothrond, and so then that was good. And we've got and they're beginning to get some suspicions about the whole mortality gig, right? Yep. Especially as Beor is like getting ready to hand things off to his heir. He's preparing his successor and stuff, which Finrod doesn't get, and all that kind of thing. And then episode 3, we had the death of Beor, right, is the A plot. He's failing, and Finrod can't handle it and has no idea what's going on. And we talked about some of the different ways in which the elves would sort of would comprehend basically what was happening with the decline of Beor of old age being the first time they'd ever seen that. And so then finally Beor dies, and we see Arenel take over as the leader of the people. And meanwhile, we have Aredhel and Eol deciding to tie the knot, right? And having something like 80% happy, 20% creepy kind of, get together there.
But she's changing him already.
Right. I mean, he's a little rough around the edges, right? But yeah, undoubtedly.
He's discovering that he needs her.
Yeah, she's got it under control, I think. Yeah.
There's measurable progress.
Exactly. Okay. All right. And so okay. See, look, I did remember. How about that? So, in episode 4, we bring in our next set of humans. We bring in the second people. We bring in the Haladin. And this is both the A and the B plot. So now this was clearly the most complicated element of this episode, right? Yes. We talked about this a little bit last time in the last session when we were doing the script, or not the script, the casting, right? Because when we got to Haleth, and I was like, okay, so how old is Haleth when we need to cast her? And Marie's all like 30 and 16, and I'm like, okay, 30 and 16.
55.
And 55, right, yeah. And the 30 and 55, I was pretty sure we could handle. The 16 was the bigger challenge. I now understand more clearly what you guys were talking about with that, and certainly the challenges with this. Though I have to admit, just on a side note, to address that issue from last time, reading through the script, on the one hand, obviously having different actresses, like a 30-year-old actress and a teen actress playing Haleth, it's going to make it easier. It's going to make it simpler. If there's actually a different person on screen, there's less of a chance that we're, who's the centerpiece. There's less of a chance that we're going to get confused by which time period we're in there. But at the same time, it kind of felt to me like that would be weirder. Actually reading the script, I was like, I'm not sure how, it could work, I suppose, but it kind of felt to me actually like it would be more natural to try to, make it work, with somebody who could be, like an actress in her 20s who could, fake 18 and also fake 30, basically seemed like the easier way to go. But,
have we considered digital aging?
Well, see, digital aging is, we talked about it a little bit. Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. And that's one of the reasons why we weren't going to worry when we had to, come back to somebody. So, 30-year-old Haleth and 50-year-old Haleth doesn't bother me, right? Like
Yeah.
like that I think we can handle digitally,
Yeah.
right? But and, the only times, Dave, that I was suggesting last time, I know you couldn't be with us last time, that we actually really need a different actress is like with the two different Andreths. Yeah, the two different Andreths, right? Because we've got Andreth, like the young teen prodigy, taking over as leader and saying we need to leave Nargothrond, and then and then falling in love with Aignor, and then we've got the much older woman who is still in many episodes and doing the actual Athrobeth with Finrod, and then going up and being not dying but still being around in the battle at the end. It seemed like we would need two actresses for that. But anyway, Haleth, I was less convinced that we needed two actresses after reading this. It kind of seemed to me like it might just be weird to have two actresses. Like, it's one thing to have like a young person and then you jump up to the old, but like going back and forth scene by scene like that, I don't know. Kind of seemed to me like it might feel weird, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's not our department again.
Right.
So
Right.
That's not my department. So.
Right. Right.
We will leave it up to Hawk on how we want to handle it.
Yes. One of the reasons why we wound up in the situation that that brought this on was that in order to, so we had a problem. We had to introduce the Haladin's plight at the Stockade near the beginning of the episode. We had to introduce their conflict, right?
The whole siege problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Which means that has to start in the first act.
Right.
But if we do that, that means we would have maybe a scene to introduce, younger Haleth and to introduce the people not in this dire circumstance, right? So, and there was a strong push to want to really dig into what their life is like, right? Because we didn't really get a chance to see what the people of Bayor's life when we had two scenes of what of them
on the road and stuff. Yeah.
Right. And this is human life. This is settled human life, and we wanted a chance to illustrate that.
Right. Right. No, and I agree that the Haladin are a really good choice for that. With when we get to those who shall become the people of Hador, the emphasis is all on their alliances, right? Not on their daily life exactly. Yeah. So we are going to get some, in the unfriendship episode, we'll get some life on the road with them, right? So we'll get to see a little bit of that. But still, I agree. I like the idea of the homesteading Haladin, right? Setting up their their encampment and all that. I mean that's I agree. That was nice. And as Stephen H is pointing out, of course we would hardly have had any chance to build up any emotional attachment to Haldad and Haldar had we started with that. We'd barely have time to introduce them by name before they would run out to their deaths. So yeah, I definitely see the issue.
What
there.
happens, but we do get to spend time with them after because of the flashback.
Right. Had there been no flashback, their deaths would have been much later in the episode, maybe the midpoint or something.
Right.
And therefore the siege would have been how they got into this predicament in this stronghold. Instead, we're jumping in right at the point that they've been pinned down for a long time.
Right.
And they're now desperately going to try and break the siege.
Right.
Because one of the problems that I was having was showing on screen this siege going on for weeks.
Right.
It would seem really outlandish, I think.
Well, and especially since there aren't that many incidents in it. There's the death of Haldad and Haldar. That's important. There's Haleth being determined and plucky and keeping the people going, which is important, right? But I agree, it would have felt like a strain to drag that on the whole time. I guess when I really liked the beginning. I mean, I really liked the idea of opening in the siege and basically starting the episode with the death of Haldad and Haldar. That seems to me to work in a bunch of different ways. I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, it's certainly attention grabbing. Like, who are these people and why are they all dying is kind of a fun way to start the episode. But of course, also, I really like the, how it kind of sets up Haleth. I mean, there's another. I mean, the death of Haldad and Haldar, in a sense, is the beginning of Haleth's story, right? So, in as much as this episode is primarily, Haleth is really the star of the episode. Her leadership life begins when Haldad and Haldar die. So, again, starting off the episode with that, it made a lot of sense. When I read the first scene, what I expected to happen, because of course I knew from the casting discussion the spoiler about there being a flashback, so I was prepared for a flashback to 16-year-old Haleth. What I expected to happen was that we would start with the scene, the scene in the siege and the tragic death of Haldad and Haldar, and then we'd flash back, and the flashback would like continue until we caught up with where we were at the beginning, like halfway or two-thirds of the way or something through the episode, and then we would continue. So that basically the whole, contiguous time of the actual siege would in fact only be like a third maybe of the episode. But it would be like that opening scene and then the last third of the episode, and then we'd be doing, so even if the flashback lasted a while, it would sort of get it. That's what I was expecting. So I was surprised when it kept jumping back and forth. That was I thought the most sort of daring choice, right, in the structure of the episode.
It's definitely the most confusing thing that's going on.
Yeah.
Certainly.
So I do want to address the confusion thing.
Okay.
Because on paper, I feel like it looks a lot more confusing than it is. Mostly because the entire present day, right, takes place within that enclosure.
Right. Inside the stockade, yeah.
With people who are differently aged and dirtier, and like everybody's really rough at the point that we're seeing them,
right?
As opposed to seeing them, healthy and celebrating, and like that wall isn't up yet, and so like it will be pretty clear.
No, I agree. I mean, I was definitely thinking it was more confusing to read than it would be to see. No question. Yeah. Because I kept having to just like look at the date and be like, wait, which date was that? Okay, no, this is the early date again. Okay, yeah. Whereas again, no question. Like, are they being attacked by orcs? Are they not being attacked by orcs? It's like a pretty clear visual cue, right? So yeah, no, that I don't think. It's not that I think they're going to get them mixed up exactly, right? That they're going to think they're in one place when they're in the other. But the kind of, let me back up a step and ask this question, and sort of approach this a different way. What is the goal of the flashback? I mean, we already talked about establishing certain things, right? Showing, how these, plucky humans, carve out a living for themselves in these lands. And also, I mean, I would add, like, how rough and wild the lands are, right? This is really like homesteading on the frontier. It's not like, now you are in the safe and domesticated lands, beneath the umbrella of the protecting Eldar, right? That is not the situation that they're facing here. So, and I think that's important to show. I think that really establishes something about the state of Beleriand and sets up relations. Go ahead.
There's a very Boonesboro feel to what they're doing here. Like they've come through the Cumberland Gap, and they're setting up this home in a place that nobody they know has ever been.
Right.
Or nobody they've even heard about has ever been.
But one of the goals was to make the transition from independent homesteads to a united group of people.
Right.
And when they're all stuck in the stockade fighting, it's kind of obvious they're going to have to work together to make this happen, right? But earlier, before they're in a desperate situation, if we see that they're very independent people, we see what the resistance to that is. Like each one has their own homestead and they have lived their own lives and keep to themselves.
Right.
Another thing I was really concerned about was the characterization of Haleth. Because we can tell the audience that she's a great leader and everybody follows her, right? We can tell them that. But showing the flashback stuff allows us to see that. So when they're building the stockade and they're building the hall to protect themselves from the vampires, right?
Like
she's everywhere.
Yeah.
She's everywhere.
She's everywhere.
Like anytime that something needs to be done, she's there helping people, showing people what to do. She's not shirking from the women's work, right? But she's also not afraid to jump in and lend a hand. When in the building work. And there's a scene, and I love the scene that Marie wrote between Haleth and her father, where despite his denials, I think that Haldad is a little deep in his cups at that point, and he expresses how proud he is of her, which is really poignant because we know he's dead, right?
Right. He's already died before we get there. Yes.
Right. And and that the people look up to her even at that age. And that was something that you guys had asked for, was for her to have shown herself to have those qualities well before we get here. So I wanted to make sure that we had the time to show that.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, I do like that. Sorry, Marie, go ahead.
You go first.
Yeah, no. I like that, and I was in that scene with Haldad at the dance. Right, one of my favorite parts of that was her, like, not just her not dancing, but like the reason she wasn't dancing. Right. I mean, there's this sense, at least the sense that I got from that, was not just like, it wasn't like I don't like boys or something like that. Instead, it was like, I have a higher calling here. Right. Like, I'm not about this. Like, that sense that, I mean, she seemed in the script to exude this, even, there at the age of 18 when her father was still alive and everything, this sense of like, I am looking out over my people and, like my only reward is to see them all safe and happy. And, and that's great. Like I really, really like that. That's, her, and especially the way that Brill, her friend, was like, this sort of queer foil to her, who was, kind of, operating, more like, an 18-year-old girl should, is supposed to be, and her brother Haldar as well. So we saw like, the youth of the people acting in appropriately youthly ways, at the dance. But yet she's different, but she's her difference. I found it very appealing. I thought that worked really well, the way that was set up.
By the way, it was only during the discussion of this episode that I realized that Haldad is dad of the Hals. His daughter Haleth and his son Haldar.
Yeah.
He's the dad of the Hals. And so, of course, the running gag was, because we didn't have a name for the friend or for her friend's father yet.
Right.
And so we were saying that that's Galdad and Galeth. Or I was.
Right.
Marie was not encouraging me in this at all.
I wisely allowed Herangil to name Brill's father.
Yeah.
So that was a.
You mean instead of Nick is what you're saying? Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
I did not ask Nick for his input for that.
Yeah. No, that is.
I gratefully accepted a better suggestion from her.
Yes, that seems prudent.
There's some supervision in the writer's room.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the supervision's mostly Nick's. So.
Yes, but
Yikes.
Nick is wise enough to know that he also knows that he shouldn't be naming things.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, is there anything more general about this that you want to talk about before we like actually dive into the stuff?
Oh, I wanted to say one thing about the intercutting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's when you see people in a refugee kind of situation where they're in dire straits and everything looks pretty bleak, it's difficult to remember that they're people. Like the more desperate their circumstances, the more dehumanized they become.
Yeah.
And as these are characters we haven't seen before, it would be very easy for the audience to just kind of disconnect from them.
Mm-hmm.
So by continually cutting back into the part of the story where they're very human and living normal lives, it helps to remind the audience how human they are in the desperate flight scene is the goal. Like that was something in my mind. I was trying to make sure we never lost sight of them as people and they didn't just become something to kind of gawk at.
Yeah. Well, either Rhiannon or Maria, I don't remember which of you, reminded me of my very favorite episode of Firefly, Out of Gas, which does something very similar.
The flashback.
The intercuts between three different time periods.
Right.
And there's a lot of cinematography that's helping them because all of
the
those
lighting
scenes are in the same space, so that's a lot more difficult than what we're doing here. But it works really, really well because like it starts off with a birthday party, you know, while we're also getting scenes of Mal like struggling to hang on to life long enough to get
bleeding through the grating in the floor. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. No, so I mean, I think it can work. So
you know, one thing I like about, or one thing that I think will help here is the presence of the stockade and the hall, in the sense that that will provide like kind of an anchor or a visual cue for where are we and what's going on here, because we'll I guess the present day, or at least the opening scene, it's finished and we know, and they're in the siege, and then in the other flashback scenes we'll see it in various stages of completion. And so I think that'll help.
That reminds me of the other problem we have. Go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say it can be like the cutting back and forth can be a little disorienting, but I think it can work here, and it's kind of like it is kind of like it's innovative, and I sort of enjoy the parallel storylines of Haleth. Like it's pretty interesting, and it's like a neat way to it's a neat way to get us up to speed on this character in one episode really fast.
Yeah. And another problem that we had was the fact that we were supposed to show Sauron putting the spell of not quite bottomless dread on captive elves in Angband. We just when we were starting to look at it, I was like, we don't have time to do that. Like there's no way. How can we? And then it dawned on me how bad the movie Twilight is, and how we could fix it. We could fix Twilight, and so we did.
Okay.
I think a better way of expressing that idea might be to say that Steve H. had a suggestion earlier on of a scene where Sauron would appear in a menacing way among the men, where it wouldn't be really clear what his goal was, but he would be trying to draw someone out to presumably something dastardly to have happen to them. And so he had painted this whole scene and said it would be great if we could work that in some way, just to kind of add a horror element to the story, rather than have Sauron be such a calculating long-term guy, have him do one thing that would have like horror in the moment to kind of capture that. So that is the suggestion that got worked into this episode, which I think, he mentioned in the comments, the name of the story that he based it on is Where You're Going, Where Have You Been?
Yeah.
So it's a short story that's horror, I think, right?
It's psychological horror. It's not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, suspense, maybe. I don't think
Yeah.
horror is maybe the right word, but something in that genre.
Mhm.
Anyway, so that was his contribution to this episode, was
Right.
to say we should have that aspect of Sauron's character.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing that I liked most about Sauron's presence was the scene with Sauron and Bulldog at the end, right? Sort of the way that provided the opportunity to show, you know, he's on the one hand, it kind of looks like Sauron isn't accomplishing anything. Like Bulldog isn't wrong. I mean, or at least it looks that way, right? I mean, like, what did he do? Like, what in fact did he affect by doing this? But the way that Sauron is sort of showing, like, you know, look, I've got a longer term plan than you have, right? And all you've done is manage to undermine everything that we were attempting to accomplish here, you know, and that I've been working on. And the idea that Sauron would just kind of show up and, you know, in order, I mean, even if he gained nothing other than just, you know, learning about them and figuring out how things worked, and you know, and you know, so that he can get a clearer idea. That seems like a very Sauron sort of approach, just to sort of scout things out there.
Yeah, I had to have motivation for him to do what he was doing, other than just it would be cool on screen.
Right.
And the problem is he is Sauron, so if he wanted these people dead, they would all be dead.
Right. Exactly. I mean, yeah.
So there had to be that. What is he gaining and why is he there? And so he only shows up after they kill one of his vampire spies.
Right.
Right.
And so he's clearly there to just observe these people. Yeah, he just wants to figure out who these people are and what they're up to. So he's kind of just in observation mode and doesn't have a clear goal in the beginning.
Right. Yeah. So that was one of the things that I felt could be sort of clarified a little bit. And I can imagine this actually, I'm trying to think of a way to kind of strengthen this, because I think that it could be strengthened in a way which would actually strengthen two different elements. One element being the Sauron plot. That is what was still a little bit unclear, like, why did he leave? Like, what did he... I mean, I could figure out what he was doing, but, like, why did he stop doing it? That was the thing that I was briefly confused by. Like, I mean, I get that, you know, he wanted Haleth to come out and she didn't come out. And, you know, and so, like, Haleth's defiance of Sauron was obviously an important thing. But then he just kind of, like, peaced out and, you know, didn't seem to have anything more to do with it. And again, it's easy for me to believe that he has a longer term plan, you know, that it's, you know, he's gone back and he's going to continue thinking about things. But that plot line didn't seem to come to a really clear, you know, kind of like mini climax or clear. I mean, it came to a point of conflict, right? It came to a sort of crisis with Sauron and Haleth. But again, it wasn't clear. Like, it was clear that he did have something in mind and that he was planning something. And then it sort of seems like he kind of drops it. And so this brings me back to then the other point as well, which is one of the other places where I felt could be done a little bit better, that I think would make me even happier with the way the flashback thing works, is kind of stitching together the end of the one and the beginning of the other a little bit more clearly. Yeah. And Nick, I think in particular, I mean, the parallel with the Out of Gas Firefly episode is a really good one, right? I mean, it's, you know, you know, the sort of not the deep flashback scenes, but the older flashback scenes end with, you know, where Mal's journey across the ship, you know, staggering and bleeding begins, right? So the you know, you get this really satisfying, not only, okay, now, like, as we're going through, I can understand more and more what, you know, has been happening from the beginning, you know, and why Mal is acting like this. But you get this really satisfying resolution where everything really kind of clicks together, right? And I felt like that was something that was still not really quite happening yet. That kind of clicking between the beginning of the battle, you know, the start of the siege plot line and the end of the flashback plot line. And I'm not saying it has to be like, the one has to end with the scene before, the other one in that kind of an exact sort of way. But one effect that I was feeling, and it's hard because, I only got a chance to read it once, and whenever I only read something once, I feel like it's not really enough to really get it. But so I might have just sort of missed things. But on my first reading of it, I was kind of left with a little bit of the feeling that the flashback plot, it accomplished many of those sort of like atmospheric character building things and had cool incidents and stuff. But it felt like it kind of petered out, almost like it didn't come to a point. And so if that could come to a clearer point, and ideally that clearer point also kind of sharpens and clarifies Sauron's actions there as well, and helps to lead in more clearly, to kind of stitch together a little bit more clearly to the beginning of the battle, right? The beginning of the siege.
Are you asking for Sauron to drop the threat that something else is coming? Because the thing is that Sauron's not going to send the orcs.
He's not going to send the orcs.
Siege.
Yeah. No, he's not.
And it's also not going to happen for 12 years.
Right. There's still a big gap.
So that's why I don't have a clear connection.
Right. Now,
And instead I went with connecting Brill's relationship with her father to their role in the siege, and Haleth's claiming of her father's spear as her own weapon as the significant ending point for her story.
Right. Because she uses it to drive Balrog off the wall. One of the things that I thought was important was to have Brill's father, whose name is slipping my mind at the moment, which is probably why we don't let me name things, that he supports her in the fight against Balrog. Because, like, let's be real, in a straight up fight between Haleth and Balrog kills her. Right. Her strength is not merely in her physical strength, which I'm sure is considerable, but her real strength is that her people will follow her into any situation.
Right. The primary strength of Haleth is not that she is the greatest, most epic warrior ever to live. Like that's not the point of her. Again, not to say that she's any slouch as a warrior, but establishing her as merely epic in that kind of purely physical sense is, I agree.
She's not Gilgamesh.
No. Yeah. No, nor is she even Hurin, necessarily. Right. Yeah. It's different. it is with her, it's primarily about the strength and indomitability of her will. Coupled with strength. She's more than competent. But I agree. She's not just a physical superhero. And I do think that that's important. Because of course, whenever someone is a physical superhero, it makes it harder, to, I think it can actually undermine the leadership, element of it in a sense, right? Because it's just like, are people just intimidated because this person can break you like a twig, or is it that this person is a great leader? To use another outside film parallel, this is actually one of the things that I thought they did pretty well in a bunch of them in the Avengers films. Captain America is the leader of the team and clearly the weakest of all of them, right? He can't compete with almost any of the other members. Some of them, but he is not more physically powerful than Iron Man or the Hulk or any of the rest of them, or Thor, and yet he is the leader of them. So again, and by doing that, they managed to emphasize, like Steve Rogers' leadership skills instead of just I'm the biggest and strongest, so do what I tell you to do. Anyway, that's the point, that I think, we kind of put Haleth sort of into that zone, and it makes her a stronger character rather than a weaker character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as to the question of how to tie those two together, why don't we what time is it? Yeah, why don't we talk through like the plot going forward,
Mm-hmm.
and see if that reveals anything to us.
Okay.
as we go through. Does that?
Sure.
Yeah. So we start out, as we've mentioned earlier, we start out with Haldad is getting ready to lead a charge out onto the field to try to take out Baldag. They can tell he's clearly the leader, that all the other orcs seem to be terrified of him, and it's possible that if they can take him out, that the others will not be a cohesive unit anymore, and they won't be a problem,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good thought.
Right.
The problem is that Bulldog is a physical superhero,
Yes.
and that's not going to work out.
Yeah.
We are hinting here. We're telling the audience here, or hinting at Haleth's leadership skills, because because when she says to him, "Well, you're taking my brother, but not me. He has a family. What are you doing?" And he says, "No. He can't do what you can do."
That was my second favorite moment, by the way. I really liked his because it has the superficial appearance of him protecting her, like, it has the superficial element of like, you are the girl, you should stay in where it's safe, right? And yet it's clear from his words and actions to her that it's actually the opposite of that he means. Like, no, I'm bringing your twin brother because he's expendable, right? You're not.
Right.
Yes.
As men in these situations clearly are.
Right. Yeah. No, I did really like that element.
And of course she's holding his old spear,
right,
while he's saying this to her, like, like that. I don't know if you have her holding it in the script, but I
do. At least I think I changed that. She's supposed to be holding the spear in that scene.
Yes.
I hope I wrote that in there. One suggestion on something I could change that might tie things together better is I could make Brill Haldar's wife. So that Brill would be the mother of Haldad's grandson and Haleth's nephew.
One thing that I do remember passingly noting, especially in like by scene 2 or 3, that there are a lot of characters.
Yes.
There are a lot of now. I mean, that there should be a whole bunch of people is fine, right? But there are like a bunch of named characters who had lines, and a little bit of compression there might make it a little tighter in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that way, if saving Brill in the backstory allows something of her brother to live on in the other story, that might be a more direct parallel, that she didn't just save her friend, she saved her future family.
Right. And especially since, of course, the child, Brill's child is going to become her heir, later on down the road. That would make it a little bit more. I don't want to say that like saving her friend is a pointless act, if it doesn't accomplish something like that. But again, it would make it, that moment, more clearly weighty, right?
Yes. And I had considered doing that at one point while writing this, and I was like, well, let's just see if it works without that. But if it didn't, that would be the way I would at least compress one element of this to hopefully give you a little bit more of what you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And actually, another thing that I kind of like about that is that I like how that positions Sauron in disguise. Right. If like Sauron in disguise is like, the stranger that Brill is flirting with. Right. If there's this like offside, kind of love triangle-ish thing going on with Sauron that makes his like position as like devious interloper, kind of a little bit, I kind of like that. Not that there's an actual love triangle, but
I was about to say love triangle with Sauron was not a thing I was intending to write.
Hey, love triangle with
One-
Sauron, absolutely.
One
I was
thing
getting
I would
excited.
also
I was
I would
getting
also
excited,
say
says Dave.
Oh no! So does that make Haleth's brother Jacob in this? Isn't Jacob the name of the werewolf in Twilight?
And does that mean that now there will be people who will be Team Sauron?
Team Sauron. Next, that's it. That's it. Yeah.
And Team Haldar.
That's way funnier. That's way funnier.
well, like I said, I was like, we could fix it, right? Because like Edward is clearly abusive and like just like their whole relationship is so toxic, but it's portrayed as we're supposed to believe it's this beautiful romantic thing, the love for the ages. And no, it's not. It's terrible. And what really happens is that he takes her into the woods and he tries to break her brain is what happens.
Right. That's what happens. That's what happens.
Right.
Now, what is Sauron's goal? Is this for him? Is he seriously just like looking for test subjects? What is his goal in breaking her brain?
So he's trying to figure out how humans work.
Okay.
He's had lots of experience with elves, and he's the one who did all the experimentation to make werewolves happen.
Right.
So he's just kind of curious.
So he's
just
conducting
breaking her
field
brain.
research. He's conducting
field research,
Right.
and he just wants to see what will happen. And he's seen what Morgoth can do to the prisoner elves, so he's just going to kind of try it out on them. He's heard they're very malleable, and he basically just wants to see if he can take over their minds.
Right.
Also,
and control them.
It should be pretty obvious to Sauron who is going to be leading these people eventually. And so he tries twice to get at Haleth. You know?
Brill's kind of just the available there backup plan. Well, I can use you as a guinea pig.
Right. And though I would add again, especially if she is the likely future wife of Haldar, it makes her a slightly more strategic target for Sauron as well. I'm actually kind of liking that more and more the more I think about it. The efficiency of that is nice. But
I was wondering.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
As I was thinking about this, I was wondering if it would be possible, and I'm trying to do this with the least amount of violence to the story as it is. If it would be possible for Brill to have an opportunity to betray Haleth in some way, but doesn't because Sauron has no ongoing influence there.
So it turns out to be a spell of slightly insufficient quantity of dread?
Yeah. Well, because she's not getting the re-ups, right?
Right.
Like Anael is getting the re-ups every once in a while with Thurin Gwethel.
Right, the vampiric visitations. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And possibly humans and elves are different, and the reason Sauron switches back to elves is because it is longer lasting and they're better spies. Even if nothing happens to Brill, she would die in 30 more years or something.
Right.
She's
In our
not
brains,
gonna live for 30 more years.
and think about it, our brain chemistry changes quite a bit from the time that you're 18 to the time you're 25 also. So on a purely physiological level,
it may just wear off.
It's exactly the kind of research he needs to be conducting, right? Because this is an entirely new thing. He's got to properly calibrate the quantities of dread involved.
As Karita points out, as Karita points out, Sauron's a big fan of the How Stuff Works or How It's Made YouTube.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean it's and so one of the things.
So am I.
We're not trying to suggest that people who like those things are in fact Sauron or evil overlords in any degree. But yeah. So I mean, one of the things that's kind of a fun contrast, right, is that from the perspective of Haleth and the rest of the Haladin, the encounter with Sauron is like a major thing, right? Like some horribly, like incalculably powerful evil figure came in among us, attempting to do with some like horrible plot to do terrible harm, when it turns out that for him it was like just a lark. He didn't actually have a plan.
Tuesday.
Right, exactly. It was like, I got a little time before my next appointment. I think I'll go and perform a couple experiments on the.
Think about what a blip in the span of his life this is.
Right.
You know, like he hangs out with them for what, like a few months, and that's nothing to him.
Right.
You know, he's been alive for all eternity.
Whereas for them, this is going to be This is going to be a scarring experience, right? And they're going to feel like they, weathered some kind of like major offensive by the bad guys, right? And that leads me towards maybe some kind of stitching material here. Maybe what's missing is another scene after Haleth turns Sauron aside. Some kind of like, I don't know, they've already had a foretaste, right? That weird stuff is afoot, right? They had the whole vampire incident, right? Which was their first sense of, we have to be on our guard. This is not a safe land that we are in. There's probably more of these freaky things around. We're in danger here, and we need to prepare to protect ourselves. Again, one of the things that I felt was kind of missing that would make the Sauron story a little bit harder hitting is it's not clear how exactly that impacts the Haladin, right? I mean, like, she resists him, and that's good, and it shows us something
because
about her. Exactly. We don't see the next thing we know, they're under siege, which has technically nothing to do with Sauron's visit, of course. And which of course isn't obvious. I mean, if we're kind of assuming that they are going to be stitched together in some sense, I bet you that, many test audiences would have assumed that Sauron's next stage was to send the army of orcs, right? Until we get the scene with Boldag and Sauron at the end, which might have been simply confusing, I think. Again. But I mean, I already knew that Boldag and Sauron weren't working together, so, I had an unfair advantage there as I was reading the script for the first time. But yeah, if there could be some kind of, some kind of denouement of the flashback, which of course can lead them to the conclusion. Like if the vampire initially led them to the conclusion, we're not safe, we need to band together, we need to protect ourselves. The Sauron in disguise incident, would have led them, I think, to further conclusions along the same lines, right? Like, we cannot be too careful. And like, the enemy is a wily enemy. They're going to attack us in different ways. They have monsters to send. They can change their form. They can do things to our brains. Like, constant vigilance, right?
So they would need to set up some kind of like alert network where they can pass information along.
Or something. I mean,
if anything happens, so they're ready for an attack. Is that what needs to happen at the end?
Well, I'm thinking they have to have a sense that something like this is going to happen. Like, a really clumsy way to characterize the kind of thing that seems to me like it would kind of stitch back around to the beginning of the siege is basically a conversation which contains something along the lines of, sooner or later, they're going to come for us, right? They know that we're here. We know that they're after us. We have to be prepared because some fine day they're going to come and they're going to try to stamp us out. They've tried, they sent their monsters and that's not going to work anymore. They tried to infiltrate and we're going to be on our guard against that. The next thing it's going to come is probably going to be like, some giant army of orcs or something. And then, that's, again, obviously that's a really clumsy way to describe, but you see the kind of thing that I mean, right? That the kinds of lessons that they're taking from. So not necessarily what they do in response, but what they learn as a consequence and how it prepares them so that we see them not only physically prepared in the sense of like, we have built a stockade that we can now defend, but they're also sort of psychologically prepared. Like we knew we were going to come under attack, and we're so not only do we have the walls built, but you can see at the beginning like we knew this was coming, right? We were ready for this. We have the stores prepared, and we have everything set up, and these orcs are giving us a hard time, but they did not catch us by surprise because we were ready for this. So that would seem to me one way anyway that we could kind of bring those together. But anyway, sorry, go ahead. Somebody else wanted to add something.
I'm trying to just work out the logistics of that, but alternatively, could we do something in the scene between Sauron and Bulldog, or possibly additionally, do something in the scene between Sauron and Bulldog, which reveals that it was known that Sauron had lived among these people, or like they were like a pet project of his, an abandoned pet project. Because like Gothmog likes to destroy Sauron's pet projects, right? We've already established that.
Right. And through his own arrogance, believes that his far more direct ways are better and more efficient, right?
Right.
Here's Sauron doing one of his, namby-pamby long-term plans, right? When in fact what this needs is, a hammer delivered in just the right place, right? Problem solved. Is there a pesky, stubborn, settlement of humans who might possibly cause a problem and clear to be intransigent and defending themselves against attack? So step one, kill them all. There you go. Problem solved, right? That's Gothmog's approach. If we could... that could be worked potentially into the initial conversation with Bulldog a little bit more explicitly, right? To make it, or Sauron could rub that in his. I mean, he's already rubbing stuff in his face anyway. He could rub that in a little bit more, right? Like so that was your plan, right? So Gothmog had a better idea than mine, right, for how to deal with Halladin, did he? Right? How did that work out for you, Bulldog?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can make it more explicit conversation. I mean, obviously, I was intending that to be what's going on.
Right.
I wasn't sure how much Sauron should be like, as you know, Gothmog's plans are terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he can say that in a way that he's being he's kicking Bulldog when he's down too. So it's not that he's telling this guy something he knows for the benefit of the audience. He's telling this guy something that he knows for the benefit of him, right? Like to get a jab in on him. Right. I was looking at the script and where it would have to happen if we wanted to add an additional scene where we went back to Haleth, maybe Haleth having kind of a almost prophetic moment predicting the possibility of a larger and more direct attack. It would have to take place after Bulldog's been thrown down from the wall and Caranthir has arrived, but before Caranthir starts, like, pulls up and starts talking. Right? There's a... I mean... It's the only place that we could really shove something like that in. Yeah. I
the other alternative is that I can extend the scene where Sauron is chased away.
That scene feels like it needs extending. Yeah.
So instead of just saying like, "Don't worry, Brill will take you home," then Haleth and her dad and her brother can talk about the future.
Right.
In that particular scene.
Yeah. The only problem is that it takes place right before Bulldog is cast off the wall. Right? Like it would like honestly the fact that they have the short conversation that they do have, it kind of slows the momentum down a little bit.
Right. So you're saying the whole conversation should be pushed a little further, like end with Sauron leaving the gate, and then do another scene, and then come back.
Right.
Then just
like
make it really, really choppy.
after Bolt. Yeah, I know. I'm feeling that too. Yes. But if I have to sacrifice, if I had to choose between sacrificing pacing or the tension, or having the tension match up, I'm gonna sacrifice pacing. Like that's of those two things. Preserving.
And I mean, what's one more additional scene cut in this particular episode?
Yeah,
it's
I
already
mean,
full.
You might as well get hanged for a sheep as a lamb at this point, as far as that goes. And I kind of like her prophecy of the forthcoming, not necessarily prophecy, but her prediction of the forthcoming attack happen right after they've won the attack. That kind of works for me. I like that. Rather than it be, I think that works. I think that's cool. So sure, that seems like a fine place to add a scene.
What we didn't do any explaining of is what on earth are these orcs doing here?
Yes.
Right? And I think that adding the motivation of it was done specifically to target one of Sauron's pet projects kind of eases that a little bit. I mean, of course, if somebody's, the average viewer isn't paying that close attention to the map where they're going to be like, wait a second. Right. But, anybody who looks at the map and goes, wait a minute.
How did they get through the siege? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which, of course, we get referred to several times. Right. Yeah.
But yes, it is a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, my initial thought was to move it further north, but then the fact that, like, as it is, the fact that they were able to maintain a siege in that area for that long without Caranthir noticing, even as far away as it is difficult to accept. You know?
No, I agree. I think that's I don't think it needs there needs to be a geographical shift. No, what I kind of like about the fact is that the first person on screen actually to voice the question, what was a pack of orcs doing down there attacking those? It's Sauron who voices that question, right? Who in his conversation with Gothmog, which is kind of fun, right? Bringing up the oddity of a bunch of orcs attacking, and at the same time that he's mocking Bulldog for doing that. And by the way, one of the ways in which we can kind of soften, instead of having just Sauron saying, well, I think Gothmog's an idiot, right? Like we don't have to have him, going quite that far. He's saying that Bulldog is an idiot, right?
Right.
And Bulldog, of course, has just lost and has just been beaten by Gothmog, right? So in critiquing Bulldog, he would almost seem to be agreeing with Gothmog, who just beat him, right?
Who's the more foolish? The fool or the fool who follows?
Exactly. So, but obviously the scorn that he heaps upon Bulldog and Bulldog's failure is obviously designed to kind of, loop back around to Gothmog, but he doesn't have to say that explicitly, to accomplish that. So that seems to work fairly well.
Hey, do we want to talk about Aradel and Aol at all before it gets too late?
Almost. I have a crucial question first, and it comes actually from a suggestion that Karita made earlier on, and this is very important. What happens to Haleth's dog? It vanished. Right, she had a faithful dog, and it ran away when the vampire attacked, which is funny. But then it's just gone. Do they eat it? What happens?
Well, okay, so the deal is that I know Trish is not actually on this particular conversation.
Right.
But I felt that explicitly stating that they ate the dogs would not be something she would want to be part of some film.
Right.
So there is no explicit statement of that. However, there are no dogs in the siege. There
are
now?
no dogs in the siege. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I was afraid of that.
I don't know what happened to them.
I was afraid of that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
It's a little
yeah,
sign.
So that's what that's.
Yeah.
Well, or possibly the army's coming in, they've run away, but the refugees under siege also don't have their dogs anymore.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll get dogs in the near future. So maybe the dogs just ran off into the woods and they'll find some more and everything will be fine.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But would you prefer there to be dogs in the
no,
siege
there doesn't
instead
have
of
to be. I
implying that they're
just,
maybe
you
eating
know,
them?
like
I mean,
I was given the
there is a
brief specter of
the-
Haleth with a faithful dog, and then the faithful dog vanished, and I was like, what happened to the faithful dog? And then I feared the worst for the faithful.
Well,
for the
for one thing,
faithful
it's
dog.
12 years later, so that faithful dog is definitely no more.
Right. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that.
Not to mention, even if it was, if people were in the dire straits that they're in the siege, I'm afraid.
I understand
that
it. No, once I thought about it a little bit, as I said, I feared the worst for the faithful dog, and understood why we wouldn't necessarily want to, you know, have an old Yeller moment in the embedded in the middle of this episode.
Yeah, maybe not.
But
basically, by not showing the dogs, I'm inviting the viewers to reach their own conclusions.
Right.
If I put the dogs in the siege, and they're walking around saying, "We have no food left to eat. We have no food left to eat," and there's these dogs running around.
Yeah.
That raises other questions.
Right. Right.
So I avoided. I had to deal with one of those, and I just took the dogs out of the scene.
No,
But yeah, I'm thinking people are going to notice that.
it's tactful. It's tactful.
Because you guys noticed it, and you only read it once, and you couldn't even see it. And the dog is definitely there at the beginning of the flashback and at the end of the flashback.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Karita says so no long shot of an empty dog bed. Yeah, no, we don't have to we don't even have to go there. Yeah. Yeah.
I see an empty chair where Tiny Tim sat.
With the empty food bowl and the leash curled up.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Well, we will have then a tacit period of mourning for the faithful dog.
A moment of silence for Haleth's faithful dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sorry, guys. They didn't mean to kill her dog.
The only consolation is that the faithful dog would not have enjoyed an end on Gortheb very much anyway. So,
that's true.
You know, at the end of the day, okay,
I mean, who does?
Well, I know, right? That's exactly it. Okay, so I had to ask the question about the dog because
it was a good question, and
important.
it raises the point of how grim this is all supposed to be.
Right.
And I made some choices throughout that I wasn't sure everybody was going to be totally cool with.
Right.
Like I maybe accidentally killed a child during the siege scene.
Right.
And I made sure he was really cute before we killed him.
I did notice that.
You're like, why do we have this cute, adorable child here? I wonder what he's for.
I got a bad feeling when he volunteered to be in the other raft, let me just say. I got a bad
Marie
feeling.
Prosser would kill a child.
Yep. Okay. All right.
I've
But
never once in my life killed a child.
That's it.
That I know
of. Yeah. So I think. Last thing about in the conversation with Caranthir at the end. I really liked Haleth all the way through. I missed the like the line, right? Like the famous line, where are Haldad my father and Haldar my brother line, that like, is that coming later? I mean, are we going to have a kind of, is this the end of her exchange with Caranthir?
Yeah. Well, isn't that line with the Brethel scene?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking, right. Yeah, no, it is. But basically,
I thought I read that.
Yeah, no. I don't mean literally the line. What I mean is, Caranthir, in the book, Caranthir demands, right, that they, it's like, well, you can move up and live here as long as you promise, not to.
Guilty.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't want to. I think I was expecting a little bit more shade from her. Yeah, from Caranthir. I mean,
she does
understand
accuse him of trampling her dad and her brother.
Yeah, no, there is that. And my favorite part was when she's like almost reluctant to accept the free meal, and then she's like, okay, no, like we're all actually on the brink of starving to death. Maybe we shouldn't say no to the elves' food. But you can. But I love the moment where you can see like she wants to, right? She wants to say no, when he offers to feed her. But I'm just thinking of like the we get a little bit of independence. What I was missing was the a little bit more explicit sense
I
of
hate
like
works with a passion now.
yeah of the like and a little bit more explicit kind of like proprietary. She's clearly resistant to him, right, and wants to be independent and doesn't want to be beholden to him, right? But I felt that I would have wanted to see a little bit more from him of not just I admire you for what you did and I kind of want to set you guys up somewhere nice, but a little bit more like I'm feeling more proprietary towards you now, right? Like I want to gather you under my protection, to make it clear, a little bit clearer what she's objecting to. I think it's possible that she could look merely ungrateful at the end, right? And again, I get it because I know where we're kind of moving with her and with her people and everything. But when Caranthir was kind of like nothing but gracious to them. There was almost nothing objectionable in what he said. Not that I want him to be a jerk completely. I mean, more than Caranthir's always a jerk. But he was actually like pretty low on the Caranthir jerk scale in that scene, which is fine. But do you see what I'm like? His offer wasn't insulting enough. I think that's what I mean.
Any jerk points that he loses, Haleth gains, is basically what you're saying.
Kind of. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if he just comes, he just rescued them, right? And instead of being like, wow, thanks, you just rescued us. That was fantastic. We'd all be dead if it weren't for you. Thank you, Mr. Fancy Rich Elf, right? Like, like that, like would it have hurt her to say thank you, Mr. Fancy Rich Elf? And instead she's all like, well, we totally had that under control. And anyway, and so like I think it could be it didn't feel like her desire to be dependent of them was fully justified, right? Like they obviously need protection in that moment, right? And he's offering protection and she's all like, no, like we'd rather starve, thank you, just because I'm like so stubborn that like and ungrateful. Whereas if there were a little bit more overt of an overtone of his like, my vassals, like now, like you can take your proper place under my lordship, basically if he made it clearer that there were strings attached to his rescuing them and that she was rejecting the strings.
And if he's already treating them like subjects.
Yes. A little bit more patronizing, by Caranthir, right?
Like not only are you my subjects, you've been my subjects since you first set foot in my lands.
Yes.
Yeah. I think
right.
that's
and
a key point.
He does introduce himself as the ruler of all the land.
Yeah.
From the river to the mountains that they're standing in, and they've been living in their whole lives.
Yeah.
So he does start with that. So this is my land, and she's like, "Oh, really? Your land? Where were you when these orcs attacked?"
Right. And
So
I did like that
there.
part. Yeah. No, I did like that.
So it's
this is the epitome of the least jerky Caranthir will be in his entire life.
Right.
Like in the story.
Yep.
As Tolkien writes it, Caranthir respects her and treats her respectfully, and some of those lines of dialogue are right out of the book.
Yep.
Like it is definitely his least jerky moment, where he's almost like, "No, wait, Haleth, don't go. I wanted to like see more of you." So
right.
Like I just made a friend, and she left.
Right. Exactly. Except, of course, like the least jerky he gets is like, you know, I almost had a nice new pet and now she's going away. You know, she ran off. Like that's, yeah. No, I hear that. I don't want to just undermine him. I don't want to make him look awful from the beginning. But
I do realize that does make her look bad for
that's
as much
the
as
problem.
he sounds reasonable. So that's yeah. So she is talking about the strings attached and how she just can't accept things with strings, but I can make a few more explicit references to his land and under his protection and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, if the strings I think if the strings are a little bit more visible, even his attitude, like she can tell what's going on, right? She can tell what is she can tell the direction that this is heading in, right? She can just read this in him. Even could he be okay? He doesn't have to be a jerk to her, but he can be more tactless, maybe. Than he was. So, like, for instance, one of the elements that I really like when he meets the dwarves later on, and he totally, like, you know, poo-poos the orc invasion, right? Oh, yeah, like, there were just a few of them, whatever. Like, we handled them easily. If he says anything that smells even vaguely like that to Haleth.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Like, oh, yes, these orcs are easily slain. And
yeah, like, basically, if it's clear that, I mean, so on the one hand, he is impressed with her, and we don't want to undermine that, because I agree with you. Like, he really is impressed at what she's done. But at the same time, he didn't think those orcs were a huge threat. And if she could get a feel of that kind of cockiness, that kind of, and therefore be able to tell, he's not really going to, you know, he's certainly not going to treat us as equals. He's at the best, you know, going to treat us as, you know, his subjects towards which he is perhaps kindly disposed at present. And I don't want any part of that. But yeah, there's no question she would maybe if she, no, in the context she wouldn't do it. I'm just trying to think of how to sort of establish the inequity a little bit more there.
Julie has a suggestion, saying you handle that almost like elves.
You handle that almost like elves, yeah. That's
I wonder if
that's good for a human mortal.
Exactly. Pat on the head. She's got to sense the pat on the head. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think related to that point of him being dismissive, maybe there could be some suggestion of him not really needing their help, that he views them as under his protection, and he kind of is he sort of implies that like he'll do all the work.
Yes.
And
yes.
Because there's really very little that they can contribute.
Yeah, come live in the north and I'll take good care of you.
Yeah, I'll take care of you.
Yeah.
Well, he's definitely talking to them more loudly and slowly than he normally would.
What if he insults the Stockade?
I mean, it was a big part
There's
of
something they've spent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If he says something like, "If you come live near Cape Hellvorn, and my people will help you build something far more safe than this rude structure."
Yeah. We'll get you some real walls.
We can. Or even like we'll teach you how to build proper defenses for yourself.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we think back to like how proud they were of the stockade that they had built together and the community moment, and he's all like, that's cute. It really, it's adorable, but
it's a miracle you lasted as long as you did.
Right, behind such shoddy defenses. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's wood, and real elves build with stone. So.
Right. Actually, I mean,
I will,
even in expressing how impressed he was, I mean, he could say something like, "I can't believe you held out as long as you did behind fortifications like that."
It's also important to note that while she's tall for a Halidin woman, Caranthir is likely a good bit taller than her, and so everything he says is going to have that kind of element of condescension
Yes.
no matter what. Like,
And
when people that much taller than me talk to me, I always feel like they're talking to me like I'm a child. It's not fair to them, but it's true.
And that and then you add obviously like his clothing and his and his armor and his weapons and his jewels. Yeah. I mean, it's
spoiler alert. In episode 6, we have Haleth having a brief conversation with Thingol, who is of course
the tallest. Yeah.
But anyway,
so she just keeps meeting these very tall, very proud elves and wanting nothing to do with them.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, Thingol, for that. It's okay. We got it. It's fine.
Right. Well, I'm looking forward to. I didn't know that Thingol was in person going to come in here. That's very interesting. Yeah.
There's reasons.
Yep. No, it's got. I'm excited. Okay. Good.
Speaking of excitement.
Speaking of excitement, Arthel. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's get there. Okay. So
this was one more plot line left.
The sea plot.
And this one was a bear.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot being juggled in this one.
Well, this plot in particular was an absolute bear because, like, first thing, we didn't have a lot of time to tell any kind of story with Arthel and Eöl, and there really isn't any story. Like, nothing's happening.
Right.
They have a conversation with dwarves that sends off a few red flags. Yeah. Right.
It is important for this. It's a really important point, though, in the progression of not only Arthel and Eöl's relationship, but Arthel's own personal plot line. Right. I mean, this is pretty much the closest she's ever going to get to actually being able to even set out to do what she wants to do. Right. And we see him shut her down as soon as she actually tries to implement it.
Right. So following,
we had to talk over.
Speaking of talking over,
we had
go
to
ahead.
Talk over. Sorry.
No.
I think my connection's slow, and
It's okay. It's okay.
How far Eöl was going to go to prevent her from doing things, and what his reasoning was, and how much Arthel would figure out about him thwarting her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was because it's one thing for the audience to see the red flags, but how much does Arthel figure out?
Right.
Here. So we did make the choice that the audience knows more than Arthel now.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And it was, when this had originally been floated, the idea that's behind this story, there was some suggestion that he uses the fact that she can't speak Khuzdul to hide things from her. But the problem is the dwarves can speak Cinder, right? They can talk to her. Like, that's not a problem. So we had to find a way to work that in to give him a chance to deceive her in some way,
right? Without
it being like, basically, and one of the important things that I like about what Marie did with this is she makes the guy who's in charge of the dwarves kind of slimy. So like when Eöl says what he says to him, he doesn't push back on it at all.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't try to. He doesn't go like, excuse me, miss, your husband over here is telling me some weird stuff. Are you okay?
Right.
Like, he's not going to get involved in whatever they've got happening. It's not his problem.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
Right. Yeah. And it's not it doesn't go to his profit motive in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He is someone who is most motivated by what he can get out of his relationships with people. So if he could get something out of Arthel, he'd be very interested. Eöl's telling him that Arthel's useless to him, so he accepts that, seemingly. But he does take the time to question Caranthir later, like, hey, do you know this person I met? because if it turns out the answer is yes, suddenly she's worthwhile again.
Right.
Right.
And when Caranthir's like, I don't know that name, then he's like, oh, okay, never mind, she's useless.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really like about following the exploits of this small group of dwarves is it allows us to once again get, I always like to get some dwarvish plot lines in, right? But also it gets us Caranthir at the beginning of the story, so that he's not coming into this story out of nowhere. He's an actual character in it.
Right. And establishing the fact that he doesn't usually travel down to the southern parts of his domain. So, there could be who knows what down there that he's unaware of. Yeah, no, I did like that. Right.
And it gives us a chance at the end of the episode to kind of revisit the Eol Aradel plot lines outside of their influence. Because the problem is that Eol's not going to talk about his deception with anybody.
Right.
Aradel can't be so far along in her suspicions that she's talking about it with anybody.
Right.
So what do we get? We don't get anything.
And that one moment, I thought it was really cunningly handled, honestly. I thought you did a great job, Maria. I really admired this a lot. Like it's just the one thing, right? One single Kuzdul remark that he makes, which he is untruthful to her about later on, right? Manages to establish that gap, and it's it's plausible that he's able to give a plausible explanation for it, and even a plausible explanation that shuts down her objections without making her suspicious that he's hiding something. But also cueing in the viewer, opening that gap between, so he's not going, Nick, as you say, he's not going to, he's not going to take anyone into his confidence about, what he's doing with her. Nor is he going to, monologue to the camera, like a Shakespearean villain, about what his plans are. So opening up a gap like that where he betrays himself through a remark that he makes but it has to be done in such a way that she couldn't figure it out or she looks dumb. Right.
And he only betrays himself to us.
So
right. Yeah.
So Nick and Rhiannon and I had to talk this scene over a bunch of times because at first we were trying to have like the whole thing happen in Kuzdal and Aradel and Eol discussing things in Quenya on the side, so the dwarves wouldn't understand. It was just like no one was speaking the same language, so no one was communicating, and I couldn't write anything into the scene. It was terrible. So that needed some reworking. And so eventually we came up with this Caranthir storyline where it would seem obvious to the audience why Eol wants to shut it down there, because we know he hates the Noldor, and we know he doesn't get along with them. And suddenly she's trying to go off and use her connections to the Noldor to do her whole dwarf plot instead of what they discussed, where he's the ambassador who would go off and be the important person.
Yeah.
Which was the only part of her plans that he ever liked. The part where it was all about him.
Right.
Yeah. And one thing I really like about this is the fact that he's isolating her. He's isolating her from her family, yes, but he's also isolating her even from the dwarves by saying, no, you insulted them.
Right.
And it's like textbook narcissist, like it's absolutely textbook.
Right.
The idea that this person is going to say, oh yeah, no, your friends don't really like you. Your family doesn't care about you. I'm the only one. I'm the only one from whom you're going to get emotional support and satisfaction.
I guess it should bother me that wasn't that difficult to write.
No, I really love, I thought it was it's interesting to hear how hard you guys worked on that, because I thought it worked really, really well. I was super impressed by that scene. Because it was very, also her name. The business with her name I thought was really good. Not only because it enabled a little bit of doubt when the dwarf meets Caranthir, right? So he doesn't actually give the name that he knows, but that moment when the dwarf calls her by this name that she doesn't really recognize, and so she's like, oh, that's a little bit weird, but she accepts it, because she's trying to be polite to the dwarves. But yeah, just the way that moment came in as he's just named her, right? So that's significant, right? That's an important moment. And she's gone along with it without being creeped out by it because she didn't really fully understand the significance of it. And there was a lot that I really liked about that.
Yeah, that some of the significance there might change. I have to work with Rhiannon if I think she wanted to use Arfiniel as Arathel's nickname in Gondolin. And she became the White Lady there, and then so there's an identity issue in Nan Elmoth or something where Arathel has to figure out who she is when she marries Eöl. Right. But I haven't got the details yet to know how to work it into the script, so I haven't quite.
But either way, it's something that Caranthir himself.
I do think we're going to use it.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a fairly recent thing, and it's something that is Eöl controlling her identity.
Right.
Which what I was going for.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No.
But yeah, I might have to tweak her reaction a little.
Right. That element of it I liked. Definitely. No, so those are the two big red flags that we were throwing up for the audience with Eöl, right? Both his obvious dishonesty to her, and the way that he was manipulating the situation when he spoke that one line in Khosdul, and then her name, but they're both like very much sufficiently subtle. Both of them are sufficiently subtle as to not just blow the game wide open. And I liked the reconciliation at the end, right? She's not dumb. She could tell that what he said was significant and changed the way that the dwarves were responding, right? So she presses him on that, but his answer is a plausible answer. And
the audience knows he's lying, but she doesn't.
But she doesn't. And it is a plausible answer. She has not ever dealt with dwarves before and can see that they're very different. And of course, even we as audience members know, like, wait, so the dwarves are like easily offended? Yeah, they're easily offended. Like that totally tracks, right? So everything about what he says is very plausible. And apart from, we know it to be untrue, but.
And given that they know how Caranthir feels about the Noldor, it seems likely to me that the dwarves would be kind of like really confused and puzzled as she's laying out this information.
Right.
So to them, like, this is completely new information, and so they're going to be kind of troubled and confused.
Right.
Which would further support this, this lie that Eöl is telling her.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Their own reactions could be reinterpreted very plausibly in exactly the way that he describes. So yeah, no, because that's of course the other risk. The risk of opening up, beginning to open up that gap of understanding how we understand more than she does without making her look dumb or a pushover. I found their like reconciliation scene at the end, although of course like the creepy factor with Eöl has gone way, way, way up because we know he's lying now for sure. And we can begin to see the pattern of how he's trying to control her and control the situation. But yet again, I bought it. I could easily imagine how even somebody who is, strong, determined, intelligent, as we have depicted Arathel, could accept that, could buy that, and could be successfully manipulated in the way that he was doing. So you guys, you said how hard this C plot was to do. I thought you guys accomplished a remarkable amount, especially the way that it tied Caranthir in. It not only gave, of course, like the book doesn't explain why Caranthir shows up, in the nick of time, right? But you guys gave an explanation for why, like, why did he not notice the orc invasion in the first place? Because it came in the part of his realm that he, doesn't visit very often.
Doesn't care about.
Exactly.
The wilderness.
Yeah, yeah. And then, but secondarily also, you gave an explanation for why on that day of all days, at that time, he decides to go down there. I was not expecting when we, started the C plot. I began to suspect when Caranthir started talking about visiting the south of his realm, but when the C plot began, we've had like dwarf C plots before, and I did not expect that it was going to be so directly like looping back into the A plot in the way that it did. And I thought that was really cool, as well as, of course, the way that it did double duty in accomplishing, what it accomplished with Arthel and Eol.
Yeah, there was no scene economy in the rest of the entire episode, so there had to be really tight scene economy in the C plot.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. That works. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah,
it's a little long.
I tried very hard not to spend a lot of scenes. I pushed back pretty heavily against the idea of spending a lot of time on present day Haladin. But I was won over. With a chance. This is probably the only chance to do out of gas, and so
right, right. And I do, I do think that it's important. I do think that it is important because of the, as you guys were saying, we're not going to. This is gonna be our only real shot at a glimpse of what life is like for the Edain out from under the elvish protection until until the House of Beor gets to Ladros, really. Because we'll see them in Estelad, we'll see them at the council and stuff, but that's not going to be the emphasis, right? We'll get glimpses of what their big settlement is like, but we're not really going to get a taste for the homesteading part of it, right? We are coming to this wild country and we are carving out our home. I think that that's a really important element to introduce. It's not just a question of, well, we're here and now we must negotiate the political realities of Beleriand and what is the relationship we're going to have with the elves, which is totally dominating the Hador and Beor plots, in this part of the season. So I do think it's worth it for that reason to give that much clearer glimpse, and especially with Caranthir. Again, the nice thing about involving Caranthir in the C plot is that he's one of the biggest possible contrasts, right? The lavish court of Caranthir, not only in his extravagantly impressive stone fortifications, but with his dripping with jewels and him acting like a magnate up there in the northeast, compared
He's
to
definitely lounging sideways in his throne,
right? Exactly, compared with the hard life that Haldad and his people are trying to carve out down there. So that feels like a really important thing to try to accomplish. It's not because also it's not only that the humans are like more primitive, right? It's not only that they are so much rougher and less polished and less accomplished than the elves, though obviously we show that as well in that contrast. But just the whole sort of attitude of things, right? The kind of entitlement that Caranthir has towards the world, right? Compared to, we're making it work, by teamwork and togetherness that we see with the Haladin. So
we've talked a lot about that, and I think we're going to get into this more in episode 6. But the fact that the world is constantly trying to kill humans, like there's an adversarial relationship there that the elves do not have. Like even the civilized elves who are living in these stone fortresses and stuff, they're not living in antagonism with the world around them in the same way that we do.
Right.
You know, like I am all about taking steps to make sure that like the world's still here for our kids and all that. But there have been people who have said that, well, you know, if the Earth is suffering because of what we did, well, Mother Nature started it, you know.
Well, and then certainly that kind of that is going to be their experience contrasted with the elves. Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, they are, it's a hard world that they're living in, even the same, like, again, in the same land, like they're in the same place practically, Caranthir and the Haladin. And yet this very land, which is, you know, which is this hard world in which they're trying to scrape out a living, is like his luxury hunting preserve, you know? So, so yeah, I mean, because you're right. I mean, even with the relationship with the natural world is just fundamentally different for the elves. You know, the way that they interact with, in part because their bodies function differently from ours. You know, like you know, from human bodies, they don't. You know,
and they're able to coax more cooperation from the world than we are.
Yes, and they don't. They're not as needy, right? They can go longer without food. You know, they can recover more easily from hurt. They
walk on top of snow.
They're fighting a lower stakes, you know, fight against nature in that way than we are, and also with advantages, you know, as you suggest. So yeah, no, I do like that. I do like showing that. You know, I mean, we've been talking about some of the ways in which we want to highlight during season 5 the very different perspectives of humans and elves, like the ways in which it is just a different world for humans than it is for elves, and that seems like a really important element to get across, and a cool opportunity to do it.
And I love, like, on an anthropological level, the way that we've been able to differentiate between the different cultures of humans. Even you have this very like the first group of humans we meet are just travelers, like they're just scraping by enough to get to the next place, right? And then we meet the Haladin, who are homesteaders, and then you meet the to-be House of Hador, who are these traveling herders, and we did a whole bunch of world building for the House of Hador, which I'm super excited to get into.
6 is going to be the council, right? Episode 6 is the council.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
Thought so.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Episode 5 is from the Elvish perspective, so we will see those men, but not understand them the way we will once we get into Hador's story.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. So a little glimpse ahead. So we're pretty much done, because I think the next thing we have is the frame, which I'm going to save. We're going to save the frame for next time. But just glancing ahead, right? So episode 5 is going to be what's coming up in episode 5. I mean, we already talked about it, so it's not like a spoiler. We already talked about the outline, but I'm forgetting. 5, because we're not continuing with Haleth right away, right?
I think we are. Isn't
we?
Haleth going through Nundungatheb in episode 5?
That's episode 5? Okay, great. Yeah. I couldn't remember whether we did it in one solid arc or whether we leave her and come back.
And we have Galadriel meeting the meeting men for the first time. Right.
The Galadriel and Celeborn honeymoon trip, right?
Yeah. And it's, you know, again, that was a great kind of examination into what that world is like, what the humans world is like. So that's gonna be fun.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so that's what's going to be coming up in episode 5, and then episode 6 will be the council. So great. Excellent. Awesome. Okay, so next time we're going to do 2 things. We're going to do, specifically, we're going to be looking at the frame. We've kind of fallen behind. We haven't even done discussed any of the frames yet. So we're going to do the first 4 frames segments, and we're also going to talk a little bit more broadly. We touched on it I started brainstorming about this semi-spontaneously during the casting discussion when we were talking about casting the Haradrim for the frame, but I want to work that up a little bit more. So we're going to talk about the culture of Harad and think about what that's going to look like and what we want to be conveying and how we want to think a little bit more about the big picture of the whole Mouth of Sauron intervention there into Harad, and we'll look specifically at least the first 4. Maybe we can even look ahead towards number 5. Who knows? Maybe we'll get frisky. But anyway, we can think about that for next time. So we're gonna be thinking about the Haradrim a lot, and we'll be working on the frame next time, and then after that we'll come back to the episode 5. So our next session will be on Thursday, February 25th at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So we are back on our regular schedule here, so that'll be good, discussing the culture of Harad and the frame. So thanks everybody. Thanks for your contributions. Marie, thank you so much for your work writing that script. That was great.
It's a really good one.
Thank you. My pleasure. Okay,
Awesome.
I'm glad you liked it. I was a little worried, Dave, because I know how much Haleth is important to you, so I wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
it was something you would enjoy.
Home run.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I look forward to seeing you guys in a couple weeks. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.